I need your energy and I need your passion now, because this is about scaling up in Europe. We all know we have groundbreaking research here. This has been mentioned quite a lot of times, and you have seen some, but the point is, how do we get this groundbreaking research on the street? How can we develop it into companies and companies that scale up? And I think it's fantastic that I have 2 generations of tech leaders here, and there's something which is anecdotal, but is highly interesting about how you develop. As you heard, Herman is a legend. He's one, as Sifted said, one of the godfathers of European computing. We couldn't imagine the development without you. And here you have him founding ARM and doing all these things, and then spending part of his time in developing junior talent, which he does with a summer school that he has in Tyrol. And it's there in Tyrol that 9 years ago, he picked Alex, which was years before Planck was founded, which was signed, and that brings the 2 of them together. And I think that is a great story. I know, Herman, that you interrupted your now summer camp in order to come here, to be with us, and I hope you spread the news also coming home about what happens, with this sort of mentorship. But before we start there, I wanted to ask Herman something before we go into the conversation. I know that he's writing on a book, which he frankly has done, and he started to write that book for a very interesting reason, and it's about, to put it short, if I use one word, tech colonialism, which I think should wake you all up. And before we go into the discussion, I would like to hand over to you, Herman, if you would explain what kicked you off to write that book and what are the main themes.
Technology colonialism and technology sovereignty really has become one of the key issues, not just for Europe, but for all countries worldwide. And the reason why I'm writing this book is actually what happened during Trump 1, that Trump forced ARM, a British company, to do something that it didn't want to do. So if Boris Johnson, who is one of my pet hates, who was a prime minister of the UK at the time, a terrible person, it looks, thank you. I've got good news for you guys who clapped, because there's some news coming out in The Guardian, in the newspaper in the UK, that he might have misappropriated some money, and he might actually end up in jail. So let's hope that happens. Anyway, but if Boris Johnson had ordered us to do something that we didn't want to do, then because he was Prime Minister of the UK at the time, that would have been legitimate, and we would have had to accept that. But for the guy in the White House to tell a British company what to do, I felt was one of those extraterritorial powers that should not be allowed. And that was really the basis of the book. There are 8 chapters of the 12th that are done.
I tried to get a grip on them. I tried to prepare, but I didn't. They're still
not done yet.
Locked away. Yeah.
But things for European tech are serious, but not hopeless. So our university system produces an IP output that is comparable to the IP output of American universities. We can be very proud of our universities. There's nothing wrong with them. There is something going wrong with American universities, but that doesn't have anything to do with the American universities. It has more to do with Trump. The number of startups in Europe is now higher than the number of startups in the US. So we actually don't have a startup problem in Europe either. What we really do have is a scale-up problem. And that's the reason why we're raising the 20 billion at the European Innovation Council to try and fill that gap. So that's in a nutshell the book.
No, there's more sex and crime to it intellectually. I'll ask you, but I think it's very important what you're doing on the EU level. And you and Eva Maydell are speaking after one another, and we're going to hear about this, and it's going on. But let me come up first to some of the statements of the book. It's about tech colonialism. What happens if we don't help? You say there's hope, but what do we need to do in order to will we ever get to this mystical word of sovereignty? I know it, and what is needed?
Well, the first thing that I do in the book is to define what sovereignty is. And sovereignty must not be confused with autarky, with doing everything yourself, because you can't. Not even the US or China will be able to do the whole stack, for example, in the semiconductor industry. So the three questions I ask in the book is, one, do you have the critical technology yourself? Because critical technologies, the key sort of critical technologies are so important for the quality of our lives and our ability to govern our countries that they're indispensable. You have to have them. So the first question is, do we have them ourselves? Everything great. Two, if you don't, and you can't for everything, do you have access to these critical technologies from a number of different independent countries, so that no single country can force you to do things as Trump has done with withholding or threatening to withhold access to design software that is a duopoly in the States by Cadence and Synopsys. But can you play different countries off against each other? If you don't get it from one, get it from the other. If the answer to the second one is no, the third question then must be, do you have guaranteed long-term, more than 5 years, unfettered access to the technology from a single country? And if you get 3 no's, then you've got to do whatever it takes. Because if you don't, then you expose yourself to this situation of economic coercion that leads to technology colonialism.
Yeah. Thank you, and as I said, there's a very strong call in the book that should keep us going. And I would say one of the most important technologies we're talking about, if we're talking about this autarky, is quantum computing, very clearly. And it was mentioned, Alex, that you are one of our big hopes in Europe. And if we, before I ask Herman what convinced him to invest in you and to coach you, could you say where you stand right now in this race that we have? Can you spread hope?
Absolutely. I think, look, our co-founders, Sebastian, myself, Johannes, we've seen the world, worked at Harvard, Berkeley, Oxford. We all came back to Europe, in particular to Munich, because we felt this enormous momentum here. Political support at one hand, the foundation of the Munich Quantum Valley, the government initiatives acting as a first customer buying quantum computers. This was quite unique around the world, and this worked very, very good here in Germany. And talent, one of the most important factors with leading universities here. So that's what convinced us to start it here, and we're building on a huge heritage, Max Planck Institute of Quantum Optics, the Munich universities with 2 Nobel Prizes of Physics in recent years. And based on that fundament, we are now able to bring that out from the lab to build actual products out of it. And we're very happy that we already sold 2 machines or have 2 projects, one with the German Aerospace Center, one together with the Leibniz Supercomputing Center, where in 2026-27, Europe's first digital neutral atom quantum computer produced by Planck will be accessible via the cloud.
Which is a clear date. I asked today the ministers, yeah? The secretaries of state, how will they measure whether they have been successful in 5 years? So here you have a clear commitment. And let me ask you, Herman, you not only coach young talent, but in the case of Planck, you invested, also through your fund. And I think this is a very important message to the young founders here who think of that. What convinces you that in a battle that is that strong and all these billions that are being invested in the US, that this team can make it and was worth your investment? Or what is the lesson learned also for other teams from that?
Having made over 200 investments in my life, I sort of boil it down to 3 criteria that I always have. In the following order, I must say. And for a propeller head like me, that the number 1 criteria would be size of the market is a new development. I had to learn the hard way that actually the size of the market and the growth rate of the market is the most important thing. And there is, of course, absolutely no doubt that quantum computing is not just a small increase in performance in computing. I've been very lucky to be involved in the change that we had from complex instruction set microprocessors to RISC, or reduced instruction set computers, which is the microprocessor in all your mobile phones with ARM. That was a factor of 10. Now, a factor of 10 is, a pretty good improvement. In quantum computing, we are talking about factors of thousands, millions, maybe billions, depending on the size of the problem that you attract. So it is a qualitative change in the problems that we'll be able to solve with quantum computers. So the first criterion, size and growth rate of the market, got a triple tick. The second criterion is the quality of the team. And people like Alex and Sebastian, are world-class leaders in quantum computing and neutral atoms in particular, which brings me to the third criterion that I have for an investment, which is the quality of the technology, and is the technology defensible? And as Alex has already said, the Max Planck Institute has a long history and a long investment in neutral atoms and how to control them and how to take advantage of them. And it was those three criteria that made me to invest.
Which I think are very helpful for those here thinking on, and also very important for what we discussed this morning, innovation policy. But if I may ask Alex, and Alex, you've had that question a lot of times, is there any chance if you compare it to the US, and it's a bit like a David against Goliath thing, if you look at the size of the capital markets, you have very often stressed that you believe in the European way of doing things, and you think that is a competitive advantage. Maybe if you could explain what you mean with the European way of building up a quantum company.
Sure. I think, to be honest, we will never compete with the US or with other entities when it's just about money. When Europe will say we'll put 5 billion, the US will say we'll put 50 million, and so on. This race, Europe will not win, but we have to find a smarter way. We have to find what I call the European way. And this is a way where we have a technological advantage. And at quantum computing, there are various technologies. I would say the fair point is the race is still open. Will it be superconductors? Will it be ions? Will it be neutral atoms like we are doing? But if we look at the talent, if we look at the supply chain, and if we look at metrics like cost per qubit or energy consumption per qubit, then there is a real advantage for neutral atoms. And this is something politics, the EU, the German government, in my opinion, has to understand. They have to take the risk and make a bet, not on 10 technologies, but with a focus on 1, 2, maximum 3 technologies, where Europe can lead the race. And there is actually a white paper from the World Economic Forum just recently, where they analyzed like 10 different technologies where Europe can still win the race or is actually in front. And quantum computing is number 1, I think, for a very good reason. And so what I hope for, and I see strong indication, is with a better focus, not distributing everything equally, but really taking the risk, also taking the risk of creating champions. I think this is something we miss here in Germany or in generally in Europe, having a funnel where startups enter, and in the end there is $1 billion chance that 2 or 3 succeed, and we have these companies like ARM in the future also in quantum computing. And then I'm very optimistic that Europe will lead that race and will win that race.
I think that's a serious change in our innovation policy, but I see Herman nodding. Like you have some thoughts here that are worth sharing.
It's so refreshing to hear it, from young people, because people just didn't have that ambition before to be global winners. They didn't even think that was possible. Now it is possible. We've never had the problem with not having enough technology in Europe. We always had the technology. We now also have the number of startups. We now need both the ambition and, for the next rounds of finance in companies like Planck, the hundreds of millions and maybe billions that are needed to make them global winners. Because it's not good enough to just win in Europe anymore. We've got to create global winners.
Yeah. Before we came to the scale-up thing, let me ask you something, Herman, with all your experience, and you don't know that we've never discussed that before, you and me. If we look at this situation that we have, that we lost it in quite some fields, and here in quantum computing we have this great chance, as Alex said, we're #1 in the WEF McKinsey report. How long do you think will this window be open, that we won't be a follower for once in the technology, but even leading?
It's very, very short. We've got to do this now. We've got to compare, we've got to look at the speed of the development of, say, the quantum sector, and it's speeding up. Even a few years ago, people doubted that a quantum computer could be produced at all because the error correction problem was so difficult. And there were some people who said, no, this is never going to work. We now know that we can make it work. So we've got enough proof of that. It is now that we've got to put both the talent and the money behind that to make sure that we have a winner.
I think that's very important, that apart from the energy and the passion, it's also the urgency that has to be clear to everyone. I mean, I have a very good feeling about politics that they do get the urgency now, but it's about the ideas and the execution. But as you have stated, it's not about having the companies because scaling them up. May I, in the last round, ask you, Herman, what your general diagnosis is about the scaling up problem? And looking at the problem, what your advice for a company like Planck would be?
As I said in the beginning, the scale-up situation is serious but not hopeless. If you compare the number of decacorns, for example, in Europe and in the States, we are or trillion-dollar. We don't have a single trillion-dollar tech company in Europe. We have three, centicorns, three. Tech companies that are worth more than 100 billion. That's ASML, SAP, and ARM. We need many more of them, and we need to build them fast. And just to give you a feel for the size of the challenge that is before us, the best funded US company is PsiQuantum. It's actually a spin-out from Bristol in the UK, who many years ago I had to advise to go to the US because that was the only place where Jeremy O'Brien could raise his first 20 million. He has raised 1.5 billion now. IonQ, which is an ion trap company, is worth 12 billion now. It's a SPAC. Continuum talks about 10 billion. So, we're not just in the billions, we're in a 10 billion valuation range. So there is a lot of pressure on us to react fast.
Thank you. So we take this pressure, and if we finish the panel with Alex. For those of you who have been here this morning, we mentioned that it was major that Minister President Söder was there when the new site of Planck was opened, and that was so major because then that sends us a very strong signal to the staff, but also to the investors in a field where they do have a lot of political support in other places, and within Europe it's France, and we will have André Leuze-Cote-Petrie speaking about that later. So that was one important thing. We heard about how much the state was the client, but then if we look at the vision, because I asked them what is their vision for the next 5 years, as the first spin-off of the Munich Quantum Valley, what are the most important next steps that would be important from politics for you, Alex, and for the whole company of Planck to flourish and become one of those scale-ups that we can be positive about?
Very good question. I think looking back, what helped us the most is the government, German government, Bavaria, or the EU as an anchor customer. As Herman said, there is no market. I would call it kind of an artificial market where government agencies buy the first quantum computers. This is of existential importance for us. Not building something in the lab, but really with a customer like the German Aerospace Center. But of course, accepting that this is kind of a funding project from the government. And this has to continue. The project with the German Aerospace Center have to continue. The Munich Quantum Valley, these local initiatives, they have to continue. Politics has to understand building a quantum computer is not done in 3 years. That's an Apollo mission to Mars, if you want to say that. The second point is venture capital. Herman mentioned it, there is a significant gap compared to the US, also Middle East. We are constantly approached by investors from the US or Middle East, which tell us the minimum ticket size is 50 million, is 100 million. Below that, we will not invest. So far, we have a cap table only with EU investors, so we refuse to take money from that region. But where are the European investors who could tell me, hey, my minimal size is 100 million, so we need a scale-up fund. I think Herman mentioned that there is something on the horizon that's very important, which helps European startups to get 100, 200, 300 million tickets, not to rely on international investors there. And the third point, I think, is we need to get international talent to Europe. And I don't mean, the science. We have the world's best ecosystem, in particular here in Munich, when it comes to quantum science. But what we are missing is like a person like Herman who knows how to scale a company basically to 1 million or 10 billion revenue. This talent is missing here, and if you're in the Bay Area, you just go to Apple or Google and hire somebody, and they will help you on a very fast speed scaling up. And in order to get that talent, we need better participation programs, virtual shares programs, and this is also our tax incentives that we get these people from major tech companies to help us scale. I think it's not on the technical side, it's more on the management side.
Thank you, Alex. I think, Alex, you're a great example also together with Herman that, if I may say so, it needs a village or maybe it needs a country to raise a unicorn, There are so many different things that are necessary, for the company to scale, and it's so important for Europe. And if we may say so, there are quite some people in this room that we have to thank for the development of Planck, Herman having supported you and maybe even planted this idea of becoming entrepreneurial, the support, the money you got, the politics that helped, Philip Gerbert, who's somewhere here, who helped with his first advice. The two universities, we need both. We need LMU and TU, and we need Max Planck. All of this has been contributing. Herman mentioned how important it was, that the ground theory that you build on is so important. So let me also make a pitch here, how important it is for the professors to support that kind of scale out. And so I hope that there will be a lot of different couples like the two of you, two generations fighting for Europe. Thank you.